Hi, everyone. I'm hoping that everybody can hear me. I'm having a little glitch here, but this is Holly Bernini from the Goodnow Library Foundation, and I'm so excited to have everybody here tonight. Today, we are going to be collaborating with Tia Pinney from the Mass Audubon Drumlin Farm. Before we start on the presentation, I'd love to tell you a little bit about who we are at the Goodnow Library Foundation. The Goodnow Library Foundation was created in 2008 to support the library's critical needs. We provide funding for capital improvements, such as physical renovations, refurbishments, and technology that are not supported by the state or the town. The foundation relies upon the financial support of our community, including private gifts from individuals, foundations, and corporate partners. Our 2018 Reimagining the Second Floor project includes a newly designed teen space, and it showcases the Sarah Sherman Now Lab, an innovative makerspace for hands-on learning that fosters problem solving through tinkering and creativity. Our current priority is the renovation and opening of the historical room to the public. We will create a dedicated quiet space for reading, writing, and studying, and we will be able to rehabilitate and customize shelving and storage for Goodnow's unique documents, historic maps, and artifacts. In addition to our capital projects, the Goodnow Library and Foundation hosts the Be Bold speaker series. These evenings have focused on a range of topics from art and science to travel, parenting, and climate change. And this winter, of course, our theme is Get Outdoors. Before I turn it over to Tia, I would love to go through a few housekeeping items. First, we do have folks joining us from all over, so please feel free to find the chat function at the bottom of the page and enter where you are tuning in from and how you learned about our program tonight. Second, we are recording this event and we will post it on our website, and we'll push out that notification when it is live. Third, everyone's camera is off. As you know, just the presenter video is being recorded and streamed, and everyone is also muted. So we ask that you submit questions using the Q&A feature that's on the toolbar at the bottom. Our foundation's Kristen Schneider is with us this evening, and she'll be monitoring the Q&A. Again, please don't use the chat feature for the Q&A. We are relying, for the questions, we're relying on the Q&A. She will look at these, address the different questions at various points during the presentation. And now I'm ready to turn it over to Tia Pinney from Mass Audubon's Drumlin Farm. And just one second, please.
Yep, no problem.
Here we go.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here tonight, and I will start with my screen share. We'll flip from Holly's to mine. Chris, I've got a thing that says host disabled print participant screen share. So you need to get in and adjust the settings so I can share a screen.
Okay, let me get in here. Just one second.
Small technical difficulty here, people.
Sorry about this.
No, that's no problem.
So give me 1 second. Oh dear. Okay. Speaker full screen. I am so sorry, everybody. If you can bear with me for 1 second.
We apologize. Sorry for that. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't know enough about Zoom to direct you how to get through this.
I don't know why it did that because it was set up.
No. Okay, let's see. If I am not sure how to do this. Tia, are you able to speak a little bit while I figure this out?
I can talk. What I'll do is you figure that out. I have a PowerPoint about Mass Audubon, which I will just talk to you about. We won't.
Okay, thank you so much.
No problem. You'll just have to look at me while I talk about Mass Audubon. Let me just bring up my slides so I can see what we're talking about. Okay, so Mass Audubon. Mass Audubon has been around for 125 years. We were founded in 1896. Mass Audubon is the original Audubon, predates even National Audubon. The current mission sentence, phrase, whatever it is our mission is to protect the nature of Massachusetts for people and for wildlife. We have, hold on. Our approach, we have our guiding strategies. If you've ever seen the Mass Audubon logo, it's a little triangle with a turn in the middle, and conservation, education, and advocacy make up the sides of that triangle. And that gives us quite a meaningful impact. Most of our work is done on our 100+ sanctuaries, but we are active all over the state and in many areas of the country. We are a nationally recognized environmental education organization. We are huge in the environmental education world.
Tia, excuse me, I'm so sorry. We have made you the host, and I think that you will be able to share your screen now.
Okay, I think we're good.
Okay,
We're going to start with screen 2 here.
let's see if this works. Apologies, everyone.
Okay, now let me start my slideshow again. Okay, so do we have a Mass Audubon, our mission?
Yeah. Yep, fantastic.
Perfect. Okay.
Thank you for your patience.
Oh, no problem. Well, it's the patience of the people who are joining us I'm more concerned about, but hopefully we'll all be good. Okay, so as I said, 125 years, guiding strategies, protect and care for land and habitats of significance. We are constantly addressing the lands that we are protecting, both in our sanctuaries and lands that we can acquire. And one of our current very strong drives right now is addressing climate change, the challenges of climate change mitigation and resiliency. Sorry, almost forgot that one. Charity Navigator loves us. So we have 135,000 members. We have at least about 500,000 visitors at our staffed sanctuaries every year, which is kind of huge. And we see about 250,000 in a normal year, not during COVID, but in a normal year, we provide environmental education to more than 250 million people, most of those being students in both primary and higher grades. But this year, obviously, our school participation is vastly reduced, but we're working on that. We're working on a whole lot of remote work, actually, which has been going very well. We have 38,000 acres of land across the state that we protect. And we have a very strong advocacy office on Beacon Hill, and that drives a lot of what we do on all of our sanctuaries. And we also have a conservation department. So here's images. Here's just dots of our sanctuaries. The lovely sort of mustard yellow ones are staffed sanctuaries. The others are unstaffed sanctuaries. And here right in the middle is Drumlin Farm. That's the sanctuary that I personally work at. We now have hubs that we've created where we now have like a Metro West hub. All the sanctuaries in here are in the same hub, and so that's a whole new genre of organization for those of us. We are so it's kind of exciting. This all happened because of COVID, but it's a silver lining in my mind. Some numbers, as we said, 135,000 members, 14,000 volunteers. That's a number I'd like to point out because volunteers are huge. We cannot do what we do without volunteers. So if you have any inclination to volunteer, we'd be delighted to have you. 9,000 plus campers every summer, and that's huge because camp is a strong way to reach children with a significant impact. We also have 6 licensed preschools, which is another very strong impact on young kids. Those kids come to, the 6 sanctuaries that run preschools. Those kids are there for at least, 1 school year, and most of them 2 to 3 school years. They spend, most of their time outside, believe it or not, it's a very, the preschools are great. As long as, you know, I don't have to teach them. Not good with small children. They don't let me hang around small children too much, no. So these are just some quotes from our marketing department from various members in a survey that was done and this survey was actually done before COVID. And COVID has increased dramatically the number of people coming to our sanctuaries that are open and available. And it's just amazing what people need right now in terms of getting out into the world and seeing what the world is like in the natural world, just experiencing the out of doors and being part of it. Those of you that are here with us tonight, you're obviously interested in being part of the out of doors or being aware and being in the out of doors. And I think it's something we all need to keep us grounded and sane. I don't go to work anywhere near as much as I used to. I'm working out of my house a whole lot. And I find that I am just walking. I am walking my neighborhood constantly just because I have to be outside. It's part of my nature at this point. And so that is Mass Audubon. And now let me close that one and open up the topic for the evening. That was my daughter's wedding. Those of you that are quick to see what's behind there. That was my daughter's wedding in Vermont a couple of years ago. We had a great time. It was a beautiful wedding. So backyard science. This is our topic for the evening. And backyard science may sound a little intimidating. You know, I put this picture up first for a reason. It's like, oh, do I have to have guidebooks? Do I have to know exactly what I'm doing? Do I have to do weird things? No, none of that is true. You can do backyard science at any level that suits your being and your participation. So I wanted to make sure that everybody is relaxed about backyard science. Oh, and by the way, if you have a question, put it in the Q&A. Chris will save them up maybe, or if there's one specific to a particular slide, she will interrupt me. So do not be shy about asking questions. If you have a question, probably somebody else does, or somebody else would appreciate knowing what your question is and hearing an answer. So don't worry about questions, ask them. The only bad question is the unasked question. So the thing that I wanted to start with, backyard science, do not be intimidated. So what is being outdoors for most of us? And for many of us, the natural world almost becomes a backdrop to what we are doing. We are walking, we are snowshoeing, we are playing in the snow. Whatever we are doing, the natural world supplies the backdrop that we are doing it in. And tonight, what I want to do is talk about what it means to be present in the out of doors, not just to be yourself doing something in there. If that makes, well, hopefully this will make more sense as we go along, but it's just an approach that I realize a lot of people have. A lot of people, when they're outside, they don't necessarily, they appreciate the outside. They appreciate the openness, the air, the activity, the trees, the flowers, the snow, the birds, but they don't necessarily notice exactly what's happening. Or take the time to notice. I think that's mostly it. Taking the time to notice is going to be a theme through the evening. So we will work on that. These pictures are all taken at various sanctuaries. I have no idea where the kid in purple is lying on the snow, but they told me it was at a sanctuary. Now, so then the question is, if we're going to be outside and we're going to be thinking about backyard science, what is science? Because for a lot of us, science, recalls, trying to get through biology and chemistry and maybe even physics when we were in high school. And that was the last time we associated ourselves with science. Many of us that I found that I am myself, I am a scientist. I studied science all the way through, and it was almost in spite of the way it was being taught, because I found that the process was fascinating, but the way science education is in this country is often very off-putting. It's a whole bunch of information that you're supposed to know when you come to the end of the semester so you can pass the test. But the issue is that science is a bunch of information. There is a body of knowledge, but it's also a process. It is constantly moving. It is constantly being evaluated and addressed, and information being looked at and new data being gathered. So science can be very exciting if we, when we are engaged in it ourselves. The outcomes of science are very useful and always changing. And that's a huge thing that we need to be aware of. Science is not, a body of information that we all know about and that, is in some box someplace and never to be addressed, never to be changed. It's sacrosanct. That's not true at all. That's not. Science in my mind. One of my favorite comments is that science is about the question, not way more than the answer. Most scientists will ask a question and pursue that question and end up with more questions. You're not after creating an answer. You're after investigating enough to develop the questions. And what's really interesting in science is that you can't actually, most of what we understand about the natural world, which is what science is. Science is the study of the natural world. That's where it came from. That's where science as a body of information developed. And most of what we know, we can't necessarily prove it to be true. We have yet to prove it to disprove what we believe are the tenets of our understanding. But that doesn't mean that we can't disprove some of those tenets, which we've done over the centuries. So there's a terrific Feynman. Richard Feynman was a Nobel physicist, and there's this terrific quote he has, which is that science, is the only discipline that tries to disprove itself all the time, which is it's an engaging concept for those of us that like to explore. And the other thing that we're going to focus on, we're going to hit before the end of the night, is that this is a global human endeavor. Science is not something that is kept in labs and ivory towers and things like that, done by people who are just not like the rest of us, and highly educated and can only talk to each other, and because nobody else can understand them. Science is a global human endeavor, and that is something we all need to embrace in order for us to be able to go forward in an effective manner as a human community. That's a heavy little bit there, but I totally believe it's true. The image here is just because I think this squirrel is hilarious. I don't know why. This squirrel cracks me up. What's it doing? Why is it doing it? What's happening? What do you notice about the squirrel? All those kinds of things. And we'll talk more about that as we go along. A little bit about the scientific process. I've mentioned process a couple times. And so I want to just talk about the scientific process as a whole. If you went to school many years after me, because I went to school a long time ago, you might have gotten some of this in your schooling. Or if some of you are young enough to be in school right now, that this may, the teaching the scientific process as opposed to just a bunch of information has become more part of the standard curricula. So the first thing that we need to do when we're doing science is make observations or incorporate data, explore things, get curious about things, ask questions about things. And then we investigate those things, we make sense of the data, and then we're back to, whoa, we got more questions. Basically what happens is that when you ask questions and investigate those questions and then try to make sense of the data that you've gathered, you end up asking more questions. Now, for most of us, we're not going to go through this whole process, no matter what it is we're engaged with. We might, what I want to talk about tonight and what I want for you to think about in terms of your backyard science and being curious is the observation and exploring and getting curious. And that is just an important place to be when you're looking at the world. Is what is it that we're seeing and what's going on here? And if you can do that, you can make huge contributions to the world of science. I can't stress enough how important it is for all of us to realize that science belongs to all of us. Do we have any questions yet, Chris? Nope. Apparently not.
We don't have any
We do
questions.
not have any questions. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. So the thing to think about when you're talking, when you're interested in being in the out of doors is what engages you in the out of doors. What is it that gets you outside? What is it that makes you want to be outside? What do you do, or what do you see, or what do you like about being outside? And start from there. And that, that includes you and your children, assuming you're a family-oriented group. If you're not, if you're just adults, that's cool. There'll be a lot of stuff about children here, but it all applies to all of us. We are all, children are terrific little scientists. And there's another great quote is by Carl Sagan about how we all start out as scientists, and then, it gets beaten out of us as we grow up. It's kind of a little heavy there, but that for most of us as adults, we've been sort of trained not to follow those curiosities. And I want to encourage you to open those back up, to let them happen, let them be what they are. I took this picture yesterday, the day before, sometime very recently at work. That's my foot in the bottom. That's my boot. That's my booted foot down here. And that is the only thing I had for a measurement. It's good to have something viable that you can measure with. I realized after I took it, I realized these are 2x4s. Now I know they're 2x4s, so I know the basic measurement of a 2x4. So that's a scale measure. But if I don't have anything else, I'll put my foot in, because someone's foot is about a foot long in general, unless they just have totally gigantic feet. An adult's foot is, you can figure it to be about a foot long. So that's why my foot is there. That's actually there on purpose. That's not a mistake to the photo. But because when you're taking an image outside, or you're taking an image of some naturally occurring event, it's good to have a scale, so that somebody who's looking at the picture, who doesn't know anything about where you are or what's going on, will have some way to measure the phenomena that they are looking at. The other thing that's in here, which is our sort of known values, there's actually quite a few. There's these are white pine needles, and white pine needles have an average length. There's a known average length of those. And as I said, a 2x4, which is actually not 2 inches by 4 inches. Once it's finished, it's 1.5 inches by 3.5 inches. But that's so those are known measurements there. But as you can see, that's not why I took this picture. And I'm assuming, I'm not assuming. I'm hoping that most of you can see that there are items in this shot which are far more interesting and engaging than a piece of 2x4 or a piece of rebar or my foot. This is a piece of rebar down here. I have no idea why that's there. This is the edge of a deck where we keep our evaporator for maple sugaring. And these 2x4s are there to be used as they're old 2x4s that were cut up, and they'll be used as fuel when we need to heat the evaporator in a few weeks, once we collect some sap. And so I was looking around, because I've also found that this area around the evaporator is a great place to find tracks, because there's lots of animals that like to come and check out the evaporator, because the drips that come out the edges or around, when it boils over and it drips down the edges, they'll come and they'll clean the edge of the tank once it's cooled. So there's usually lots of animal tracks around there, and I needed some pictures of tracks for something else that I was doing. So I went over there, and I found some completely unexpected evidence. There's a building just to the left here. There's a building off above, this section here is underneath this building. And I think there's quite a few critters who like to live in and under this open area that's under the building. And you can see that we have a fair amount of stuff going on here. I'm highlighting with my little cursor the reason why I took this picture. There's all kinds of evidence of animal activity here. And what we have is evidence of something eating. And that's kind of important in terms of, you know, observations in the outside world, because animals don't stop to eat unless they feel safe enough to stop to eat. These are herbivorous animals. These are animals that are not carnivores. They're not predators. These are generally prey animals. They're eating nuts and seeds. And they need to feel that where they are is secure enough that they can stop and eat. They're not just, you know, they're not going to just sit down and eat in the middle of anywhere unless they're fairly certain that they have some degree of safety. So, you know, whoever has been here feels very safe, right? They've brought materials in to eat, and they've eaten them here in this location. There's actually 2 or 3 more of these these are chewed nuts. And there were 2 or 3 more outside the realm of this picture. So that's, you know, this is just arbitrarily, I found this but I noticed it. And that's the trick. It's the noticing. This is a, excuse me, I lose words at this state in my life. In my maturity, I totally lose words. So if I pause and look blank for a minute, it's just I'm trying to recover a word. I may ask for help at some point. Sometimes they're so far gone they won't come up unless somebody helps me. This is a white pine cone, and it has been stripped of its scales, and the seeds are inside these scales in general. And so this is a squirrel. I would guarantee that this is a squirrel just because I know what's around this area. I would almost guarantee that this is all likely a red squirrel, not a gray squirrel, but I can't guarantee that because I didn't see the animal that did this. But they strip off the scales and they eat the little seeds from inside. Not so unusual. If anybody has ever had pinoli's or pine nuts, that's exactly the same thing. This squirrel is eating pine nuts, and many of us have eaten pine nuts. If you haven't, you know, pesto often has pine nuts in it. So it's, you know, we're verging on the same food source in that regard, different kind of pine, but the same thing, pine seeds. So this indicates, and this also indicates red squirrel to me. A stripped off cone like that is classic for a red squirrel. But that's not something you need to know in order to notice this and to take note of it and to record it. And we'll talk more about that later. Whereas these 2 items here are black walnuts. Sorry, those are black walnuts that were chewed open. If we could get a better shot of this, I was doing this with my phone. If we had a better shot of this, a close-up shot, we'd be able to see little tiny striations there caused by those 2 little rodent teeth from a squirrel. And they can chew their way right into this very hard nut and eat the nut meat out from it. Same thing many of us like to do. Have a walnut or a pecan, would look almost exactly the same. Shape of the nut would be a little bit different. But so this, you know, this whole conversation is because this engaged me. I was engaged by what was going on here. And I'm just showing you that process of my engagement, just to get you thinking about what is your engagement. And so this is I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of, is a format that was developed by a group called the Beatles Project. And it's actually developed as a school-based, teacher-oriented, with students, classroom process, but it is an excellent way to approach the natural world. I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of, is just when you are outside, look around. What's happening? It actually increases your curiosity to say, what do I notice? And just to repeat that, I notice there's a branch here. Well, okay, I notice there's something going on here in the snow. I notice there's another something going on here. I notice some white pine, needles, a white pine stem tip down here on the ground. You know, it allows you to engage and to make observations. I noticed something. What do you wonder about what you noticed? What are you thinking about that? So I noticed this hole in the ground. Actually, what's got me to stop and take this photo was first I noticed this relatively large pile of debris. You can tell it's not a huge pile of debris, but it's a little pile of dirt and leaves and things like that that are beside a small hole in the snow. And I was like, huh, who did that? So that's, that's my question. I made my observation. I was asking some questions. And then I'm like, okay, so my past experience tells me a whole bunch of stuff because I've got a lot of past experience. If you don't have a lot of past experience, then you have to start to build that. But what does it remind you of? Where have you seen something like this before? Or what have you seen that this might remind you of? Hold on 2 seconds. I have to turn off I have a little heater in my room and it's got too warm. What does, how do you relate to that piece of information or that observation? What can you make sense of from this? And the big thing here, one of the big things here is to focus on observation. And that observation is distinct from opinion. And it's also distinct from being able to identify it. You do not need to be able to identify things in order to observe them. You can observe them, you can wonder about them, it can remind you of things, and you can know absolutely nothing about what it actually is. Not important. But it is also not, and it's not an opinion. It's not, why did this happen? Or I think this looks like X. I think this looks like, some tiger came and tried to eat a pine tree. Well, that's an opinion. That is totally an opinion from, out of the blue. Speaking of out of the blue, I have a good friend that I work with, and she was working with a bunch of preschoolers one time with a program. And I can't remember what the program was based on, some natural history, some observation, something. And she said, okay, does anybody have any questions? And one child raised her hand and said, yes, do you know what my favorite color is? It's totally off topic. I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of, does not cover, do you know what my favorite color is? But that's fine. That was what was important to her at the moment. And that's the thing. If you're doing this with kids, do not, you can't force the focus. You can help the focus. You can encourage the focus. You can let the children's interest drive the particular focus and help the focus then stay there a little bit. We all think kids can't concentrate on anything for more than 30 seconds at a time, unless forced to. But if the child if the child hones in on this whole, then go with, what do you notice? And what are you wondering about? And does that remind you of anything? And so, take note of it. And next time you see a hole in the snow, maybe it'll be the same, or maybe it'll be similar, or maybe it'll be something completely different. But this is an interesting, this is just a great way to approach looking at the natural world beyond sort of like, I'm in it. What do I see in it? Okay, so here's another slide that I took the other day. These are all slides I took literally in the past 2 or 3 days before before today's snow. Actually, most of them were before even Monday's snow. So now here we are. I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of, which some people like to call Iniwirmo. If you take the first letter, Iniwirmo, Iniwirmo. So we can Iniwirmo this photo here, which this is as close as I could get to anything that I was looking at, because this is a body of water that has ice on it. I was not comfortable with walking out on this body of water. If I had been comfortable with walking out on the body of water, I might have gone over to see more closely what I took a picture of. But I wasn't comfortable going out on the body of water, which is something I strongly encourage you to be very suspect of any body of water. It may look frozen and it may not be frozen. certainly not hard enough to stand on, especially in this area of the, if you're in Eastern Massachusetts, it's a hard call to say that a body of water is totally frozen enough to stand on. And often the edges where you would get out onto the water are the worst, because the warm ground, or the ground heats up when it's not covered with snow. The ground is warmer than the water, and you will have really rotten ice at the edges. So I want to ensure safety in your explorations. You know, depending on what you've got in your backyard, you may have water that you know well and that you feel safe about. That's totally cool. But this is a small pond near my house, and I do see it on a semi-regular basis, but I don't trust it. I don't go out on it. But what we notice here, unless somebody wants to put in the Q&A something they notice, actually go ahead. Let's take a couple minutes. Go ahead and put in the Q&A, or put, I don't know, wherever Kristen wants it, the Q&A or the chat, whichever she prefers.
The Q&A would be great.
The Q&A, she says, put it in the Q&A. What do you notice? So we'll just take a minute for people to put in something they notice. Gives me a chance for a drink of water.
I got a question that, or not a question, just something that they noticed that says, they notice that it's in a zigzag pattern. Like
A zigzag pattern. So are we talking about these little bumps going across the pond?
yes, like it looks like I guess it looks like it's gone back and forth, whatever.
Okay, so it looks like, so already we jumped past I notice, right? We jumped to I know something walked across the ice.
Right.
And that's not, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but already realize that you've jumped a couple steps. So what you notice is it looks like something walked across the ice. We can take our past experience and say, yes, something walked across the ice, and either more than one something, right? Or it went back and forth a couple times. So that's somebody's notice there, that they see this pattern where something's walked across the ice and maybe went and came back. We don't have enough. These tracks are old enough that we can't evaluate which direction they were going in even. Okay, something else.
I don't have any other observations quite yet.
No other observations?
No.
No, I'm going to wait until somebody makes one. I've been at this long enough. I can handle a few minutes of waiting. I just want to see what else anybody else notices, because the tracks are definitely out there, definitely overt and interesting. When did they, I'm wondering when they went across the ice. What time of day? How many days ago? There's lots of things to wonder about though. What animal went across the ice?
This is Holly, and I actually am wondering when, or how do animals know? When do we don't know what's in their brain, but how do they know that it's safe
Exactly.
out there?
Great question. How does the animal know that it's safe to be out there? Exactly. And safe is very different for a deer than it is for a fox, right? The level of ice necessary for a fox to walk across that pond is far less than for a deer to walk across that pond. So that's a great question, Holly. And that's a fascinating thing to wonder about. And I don't know that you could, that's probably a research question. We'd have to go.
I have a couple other Q&As here. There are cracks in the ice, ? Well, at least they look like cracks. Also, it looks like it is late afternoon.
Very excellent observations. It is late afternoon. So you noticed that it's late afternoon. Yeah, this was probably close to sunset. So it was probably 4:30 in the afternoon. Sunset's probably around 5 by now. And it does look like cracks in the ice. And those cracks in the ice appear to be radiating from a couple of holes. Actually, there are 3 that we can see here. There's all kinds of things to notice and then to wonder about. Like, where did these holes come from?
And I got another observation that the footprints go around the holes in the ice. So
The footprints, right, the footprints avoided the holes, right? Over
Right.
here, they appear, it appears that the footprints kind of cross one or two of the radiating cracks from this bigger hole. But did the footprints happen before the hole or after the hole? Are they simultaneous? You know, there's a lot we don't know here. And that brings up one of the things, which is that the more you're curious about something and the more you want to know, the more you have to go back and look at it. The more observations you have to make. In order to really get anywhere with a lot of this, these questions we're coming up with, we'd have to probably go back to this location, to this site, and you know, several more times. The one thing that I know that you don't know, because it's not in the picture, is that this pond has beaver. And it also it may have otter. I'm not sure about the otter. I know it has beaver because I see beaver sign along the trail, and there's a beaver lodge also in this pond. And beaver and otter will make air holes. They will prevent the ice from freezing solid, from freezing so solid that they can't bash it with their heads and make an air hole. And so that is my presumption on what these holes are. But I'd have to go back and make a lot more observations in order to be more secure on that piece of information. And in order to pursue that thought, I think these are beaver or otter air holes. I'd have to go back because they tend to keep them in the same place, because once the ice is frozen around it, it's the easiest thing to do is go back to the original hole and reopen it every time. So if those holes stay in the same place and maintain that same look, then they're probably beaver or otter air holes. So that's a totally cool thing to see, and a totally cool thing to note and even to report. We will talk about that later. We'll get to that before the end of the evening. So here we are with just a random shot of a pond in my neighborhood. The one thing I want to encourage you about, I've talked about recording, and recording is actually very engaging. And there are kids. I have 3 grandkids up in Maine. My granddaughter is 9 now, and her twin brothers are now 6, and they all love to record stuff. All 3 of them do. She's far more adept at it than they are, but recording things is they love to record the things they notice. And this is something we've done over the years. I admit to being a terrible person at keeping field notes. I am just bad at it. It's something I used to consider a failing. I just live with it now. But if you can develop the habit of recording in a field journal, it will, for you or your children or both of you, it is a tremendously wonderful thing. There was an exhibit at the Concord Museum where it was about Thoreau and his observations and writing his observations, but in it they had incorporated, I tried to find a picture of this, but I couldn't. They'd incorporated panels from somebody's kitchen or pantry or something where this person had just written right on the panels of the cupboards and the walls, things like, the day they saw the day they first saw the blueberries blooming, or the day they first saw the asparagus come up out of the ground. For decades, they never painted the room. And so they're just these columns of information. It was just a beautiful thing. Not terribly useful to anybody else, but if somebody's willing to come and transcribe all that, that's actually great information to have. So we're going to talk a little bit about field journals, field notebooks, science notebooks, call them whatever appeals to you. You have a lot of different ways to approach this in terms of the book itself. You can make your own. You can make your own field journal. Just take some paper, get something a little heavier for a cover, put them together. You can staple them together. this one that, you know, punched a hole with a hole punch and then tied it together, fold it over, make your own. A lot of kids love to make their own. You can buy a blank notebook, and you can buy a blank notebook that's either lined or unlined or has graph paper in it, whatever suits you. For kids, you know, it's totally up to you. Sometimes it's good to have more parameters. Sometimes, you know, they're fine with not having parameters. If you have kids that really like parameters, you can get them sort of a pre-made, pre-published, organized logbook type of a journal. This is one specifically devoted to birds, but you can get them more generalized, or you can download. You can go online and find pre-made field guide pages. You can print them out and put them together in your own field guide. One thing I will say is that if you're going to buy a notebook to dedicate as a field journal, look for all-weather notebooks. There's one called Write in the Rain or something like that. And this is an image of notebooks that I got for a field naturalist course that I teach for all the participants. So if you're gonna buy one, go ahead and, because there are notebooks that do not disintegrate in the rain, or when you drop them, you know, when you put them down on the ground and the ground is wet, or you drop them in the puddle, they'll be fine. So if you're gonna buy a blank notebook, I recommend buying an all-weather notebook. That's my only caveat, to do whatever works for you. So that's the journal itself. And then the process, you know, try to incorporate any way you interact with the world is good. You can have very specific guidelines. As I said, you can have very specific pages to fill out, or you can have blank pages where you can draw images of what you've seen. The one thing about drawings is to label them. You know, what are we looking at? You know, so this is the dorsal or the back, right? This is ventral or the front. You don't need to use words like dorsal and ventral. But, you know, if you know them, that's totally cool. If you don't, say front and back, say leg, whatever. That's not important. But drawing is an excellent way to focus your observation. It involves your senses in a way that's completely different than taking a picture or even writing a description. I mean, if you can create a drawing and write a picture, and write a description of it, that is an excellent processing way of getting you to see all the bits that are going on. And even if you say you do not know how to draw, that is not important. How you draw is not important. You will see, you know, if you look up field journals and, you know, online, or you'll see courses in field journaling, and these people have these gorgeous, these beautiful drawings. And it's like, yeah, right. Like, that's the way, you know, no, that's not my life. But in fact, most field biologists are not artists. And you can look at, there's a book out. I've got it somewhere in my room, actually, here. I'm not quite sure where I put it, but is by a guy named Michael Canfield about doing field notes. And he looked at field journals from many famous field scientists. And they were just like, you know, just these little squiggles for drawings or whatever, but they were very consistent, and the data was recorded, and they knew exactly what they were recording and why they were recording it, and what the, you know, they had their own parameters, and never was the parameter that it had to be pretty. So never worry about that. That's something we all need to overcome. In this image down here on the bottom, she's actually, or he, I don't know which, they've actually put in pieces of plant. They're incorporating, I don't know what they're looking at or why, but they've, rather than do drawings, they've put in pieces of the plants they're looking at. You'll also notice these plants are completely identified down to, you know, genus and species. Not necessary. It is not necessary. Just the recording. Start with the recording. If it works for you to take images, to take photos, or if you see something, you know, if you print out something that you read, you want to stick that in there, whatever works. If you want to start a field guide about ants and you have pictures of ants, and you put them in there and see if you ever see those ants. You know, I'm talking off the top of my head as to whatever might engage you or your children in this process. Just go with what works to get you to make the recordings and to do the observation as much as recording. One important aspect, which is often not talked about, but I do think is critical if you're going to make a scientific type of observation, is the data about it. When was it? What date is it? What time of the, what part of the year are we talking about? What time of the day are we talking about? General weather observations are often very useful. And nowadays you can pull up on your iPhone, what the temperature is in exactly where you are. So that's often very helpful. So that
excuse
kind of,
me. Speaking
yes.
of pulling up on your iPhone, we did just get a question. If there were any apps on phone that you would recommend for journaling?
We'll get to that.
Okay.
That you're anticipating. You're a few slides ahead of me, so we will get to those. Thank you for that question. That's a very good, because nowadays a lot of people are not doing things on paper, and we will talk about that in a minute. I wanted to start with paper just because it's very tactile. Some of us like to be tactile. But so every time you're making an observation, make sure that you've written down the date and the clarifying information, and also what's really useful if the book is used by anybody else is who it is. Presumably it's your book or your child's book, and that we know from the get-go. But that's an important aspect in terms of scientific process, because you need to know who made the recording so you can go back and ask questions about the recording if you find it later or if you submit it someplace. And the big thing here is practice the observation. You can record questions as they come to you while you're practicing your observation and recording the information of what's going on. But this is actually from this guy, John Muir Laws. Presumably his parents named him John Muir, which is kind of interesting. But John Muir Laws has a great website about journaling. He has online webinar stuff, and a lot of it is free. Pretty much all of it, I think, is free. But he has a question up here. It's like, why? Why do they fly in a flock? Well, we don't have any idea why, really. Why is not a great question when you're making nature observations. What do you notice? And you can say, I noticed they're flying in flocks of 20. Why they're flying in flocks of 20 is probably not something we can truly address in an observational format. But like down here, he notices that these birds that he's drawn a picture of are eating berries. And so then the question is, can I eat those same berries? And then got interested enough in the berries to go ahead and analyze the berries, to open them up and look and see what there was about the berries that they could be informed about. So lots of different ways to pursue an interest and to practice observation. Nowhere here does it say, I think this means X, which is sort of what happens when you ask a why question. Often you come up with an answer that like, I think this means that they like me. they're right here in this bush close to me, but silly things like that. That was extreme, but just, try to stay in the moment rather than in yourself. And develop the habit. It is totally about good habits when you're talking about this kind of behavior. I mean, this kind of observational work is developing the habit of doing the observation. I worked with a teacher in the town of Shirley, actually, and she taught 4th and 5th grade, I believe, this years ago. But her class got so engaged in field journaling that they totally, it had to be on the calendar. It had to be somewhere in the week. And finally, they set aside a particular time every Friday, or I think it was Friday, whatever it was. And they didn't care what the weather was. It could be pouring rain, and they were going to go outside and do their field journal. So they were so committed and they were so engaged in the process and the habit that it became an absolute, no matter what else happened in their week. They went outside to do their field journals. And that's part of a pattern, you know, and also the materials, have the materials ready. You know, if you're going to go outside and make observations, have whatever it is that you need, whether it's a field journal and some colored pencils or you know, a magnifying glass, whatever. You can have a field kit. I highly recommend making a field kit. You know, I never leave the house without my binoculars and my hand lens, you know, and a couple other odds and ends. I don't tend to go out. I don't take field guides outside with me. If I want to identify things, I tend to do that later through work online or work with my field guides. But I have with me what I need to make the observation. And repetition is an excellent thing in this regard. Whether you go back to the same area, pick a focus. One thing I will say is that to go outside, especially with young kids, is often difficult. There's so much to see that it helps both me. I find it's very helpful personally, and it helps children also to focus on something, not like, whoa, you know, look at the trees. How about this tree? How about this branch on this tree? How about, you know, this little square of ground that's at the base of the tree? Whatever it is, it often helps to focus. It helps you notice things if you focus in on one particular aspect or one particular area. We're going to look at the leaf. We're going to look at this leaf, and then maybe we can find some other leaves that look like this leaf, or whatever it is. We found a hole in the snow. Can we find other holes in the snow? But just help them develop that focus. The image up at the top, on the top right here, is from Mythbusters, which I think Mythbusters is still around, but I've always loved this quote. The difference between messing about and science is writing it down. Really, you know, a lot of us mess about. You know, you can make a huge difference just by recording it. And then the bottom quote is from a gentleman named Bernd Heinrich. If you're at all interested in natural history and natural history writers, Bernd Heinrich is a spectacular recorder of natural history, and he's also an excellent writer. He's a retired professor from the University of Vermont, and he lives in Maine. I think he might live in Maine and Vermont now at this point. I'm not sure, but his books are all terrific. He has a book called The Mind of the Raven. It's really cool. He has a book about winter called Winter World, also excellent. So there you go. A couple of just some things to think about. Those are all, but now the one scientific premise that I want to talk about today is phenology. Phenology is a great word. I love vocabulary. I think it's one reason I studied science, is there's great words in science. So phenology is when do things happen? It is the study of natural phenomena that are seasonal or cyclical. And essentially, you know, like, when do the leaves open? When do the buds open for the flowers? You know, when does it bloom? You know, when are the raspberries ripe? When do the leaves turn color? When do they fall off? You know, when do the broadwing hawks migrate? You know, when do we see the geese go by? Those are all phenological phenomena. Those are all things that happen at particular times. And the timing of these events is controlled by multiple environmental factors, and including length of day and weather and climate and all kinds of things. So climate change is having a tremendous impact on phenological events, on cyclical seasonal events. So, and it is in fact disrupting the timing of those events. It's changing the timing of those events, I should say. And it's also, it's disrupting synchronization of those events. One thing I will talk about, you know, like, when oak trees are huge holders or habitats and food sources for all kinds of caterpillars. The little tiny inchworms that we see that hang down out of the trees sometimes. There are hundreds of different species of those. that live in oak trees. And when the small little songbirds, the little migrating warblers come through in the spring, they are dependent on those tiny little inchworms. They eat them in vast numbers in order to build up their strength to either fly on further north to breed, or if they stay and breed here, they collect them in huge numbers to feed their own offspring, themselves and their offspring. So those tiny little caterpillars are very important. And the timing of migration and the opening of the buds that from which the caterpillars emerge in the spring has been very closely related. The migration of the birds is not shifting as much as the timing of the bud opening of the trees. So they're becoming discontinuous. And is this going to be important? Is this a huge, will this have a big impact on the survivability of the birds? We don't have enough data at this point to know that. We suspect that may be true, but we don't know because we don't have enough data. So we need to collect data. Excuse me. And the need for data is what's happening right now, and what do we see happening? What's the ongoing monitoring? You know, as we look at these things over decades, what do we notice? Because phenological change or a change in cyclical phenomena or seasonal phenomena is often only picked up after many, many years. The picture at the bottom, the Lowell Cemetery on May 30th. So in 1868, you can see this is a little staircase which shows up right here. Even though this looks white, I'm assuming that it's the same and that it's been discolored over the decades, over the century here, into this grayer form, and that there's now a tree growing right in the middle of this this set of columns. This column's probably off the picture, I don't know. But at any rate, we have a tree here, which is very possibly this tree here, but they might not be the same. This tree may not be old enough to be that tree 150 years ago. But the big thing to notice is this is completely treeless. And this is completely, I mean, leafless, geez, treeless. This is completely leafed out. And here, we don't have a leaf in sight. Now, this is one picture at one moment in time. What we would need to see is May 30th on many different years. We'd need to see pictures from May 30th or thereabouts from 1872, 1885, whatever. We'd need to track May 30th over the century and a half in order to truly say, yes, this is a complete change. 2005 could have been an aberration, or 1868 could have been an aberration. We don't know from just two data points is not enough. And that leads us to the other part of the prospect for the evening.
Can I ask a question? I'm interrupting here.
No, go ahead.
So I'm wondering, I don't know how to say this properly, but are there forums or discussions, say across the country or here versus down south, of these cyclic changes? And so somebody up here journaling what's happening here, are the leaves turning orange and red here versus down south? How many weeks behind are you?
Right, and that is ongoing, and that is part of what we're going to talk about next. As an excellent segue, thank you, which is that community science, the engagement of individuals into making observations on a regular basis it's usually referred to, and it has been historically referred to, as citizen science. We are intentionally calling it community science, as community being a more engaging terminology. With our past administration, citizen became a little bit of a contentious accolade or term. So community science is a more embracing term. You will usually see it referred to as citizen science, and there are many groups online that engage in citizen science organizations. But I want to encourage us to think of it as community science. But to be part of the part of the engagement, the recording of the data, contributing your data someplace, sending your data in. And then in most cases, when you are part of the organization, or even if you aren't, you can see the data that has been collected. You can see other people's data. And there's something very compelling about that, to say, hey, my data is in there, and look at all this other data that people have put in. And these two students here are analyzing soil as part of a community science project, where the protocol is all set up by the organization to which you are contributing the data. And that's the really nice part about this, is that you can find something that engages you. If it's soil, if it's birds, if it's caterpillars, if it's flowers, you can find a science project. You can find some kind of you can find a project that you can contribute to, and they will have a protocol, and you follow the protocol and contribute your data. Some of the protocols are very straightforward and simple to engage with, and some are more complex. So you have to figure out your level of engagement. Some will do a lot of training for you to be part of that. There's a group called the National Phenological Network that puts together a lot of these, it puts together the people in the project in some ways. There are others that are there's just a lot of organizations out there, and we can contribute to very many different organizations. This page here are several that I know about, that I just came up with. I didn't do research on these. These are community science opportunities that I know about. We've got a few minutes left. I think we've got enough time. I think I'm going to click on this one here, and hopefully this will work, where it will take you to we will go to my browser, where we will open the Cornell Lab of Ornithology is sort of like, it is the bird education. I know, I should say Mass Audubon is the bird education center of the universe, but it's not. It's really Cornell. The Cornell Lab of Ornithology is really where you want to go to if you want to learn about observing birds, and they also collect a whole lot of data. Mass Audubon is a tremendous organization, but we do not have the capacity to gather and organize data, which just, processing data is important and that's what takes a lot of money and effort. And so it's why it's good to contribute to places where things are already current. But so let's see if this works. Are we now working? Are we looking at the Great Backyard Bird Count page?
Yes, yes.
Okay. The reason I wanted to click on this one is that it's this weekend. This weekend is the Great Backyard Bird Count. And Cornell has done a number of different things over the years to engage people in all kinds of ways of contributing any kind of observations that they can. And one of the things this is sort of on the realm of the Christmas bird count, which has been done for like 100+ years, organized by National Audubon. But the Great Christmas bird count, the Great Backyard Bird Count, is where you can walk out in your backyard or go, down the road, or join a group of people that are near you and see what you notice. The cool thing about this is that they do use eBird, which we'll talk about in a minute, but this particular bird count also uses an app called Merlin. Another eBird is organized and contained, it's owned essentially by Cornell, the Cornell Lab, but they also have created an app called Merlin, which allows you to learn about birds while you're looking at them. And it's totally cool. And you can use Merlin to go out and record the birds that you see this coming weekend and contribute them to the Great Backyard Bird Count, which is just, that's cool, They also have, let's see where we are. They have Feeder Watch, which is if you have a bird feeder up, you can report the birds and the activity at your bird feeder. They also have Nest Watch, which involves a little more knowledge, activity, whatever, where you observe the nesting activity of birds in your area during the spring. So those are 3 bird-oriented ones that are very easy to engage with. Beecology, I threw in here because, let's click on this one, see what this looks like. Beecology is cool because it comes out of Worcester. Now, it is very focused because you have to look at bees. You have to look at native bees. They want to know what are the native pollinators that are going, that are in your area. But it's cool because it's a very local project for us. I mean, they're all over the country, but the organization itself, Beecology, is out of Worcester Polytech, WPI. And so you collect data, and then you can look at the data. You can you can learn a whole lot by your participation. Again, they've created apps of their own that help you to photograph and identify bumblebees. They're particularly interested in bumblebees. There are a number of native bumblebee species. We think there's one, there's not, there's a bunch. And so that's totally cool. But if you have kids and you are interested, these 2, Journey North and Firefly Watch. Firefly Watch is now, it was being overseen and organized by the Museum of Science in Boston, and they gave it up. And so Mass Audubon took it on. We were engaged, we were working with them, but they decided they could no longer do the upkeep. And so it came to us. So Mass Audubon is now the organization that is in charge of this. It's totally cool because we have scientists that we are working with, but you can see that there are people contributing data from all over the country on what fireflies they're seeing and when they're seeing them. And this is a very specific protocol. It's an easy protocol for the most part, but it is quite specific. And you do need to know a little bit about the different kinds of fireflies that one might see when one is out, and you need to be out and about at the right time. Late June, well, actually June through early July, if for the most part. So, and you have to be out at night, so that's kind of cool. So there's all kinds of projects that have very specific protocols. But Journey North, which I won't click on Journey North because this is an image from the opening page of Journey North, which was started specifically aimed at engaging children. But you can track hummingbirds, they track monarchs, they track American robins. You can be engaged in many different projects. When leaf out, and leaf out is exactly what it sounds like. When do the leaves open on your tree in your yard? And that is data that can be submitted to a bunch of different places. But they give you the protocol. They tell you what they really want to know, and when to collect the data and what data to collect. And so it's very cool. All of these are terrific projects to be involved with. These are by far not the only options. There are many, many, many different options out there that you can engage in. And so that's a very, they're more focused, I should say, than just making observations about things in general. So if you like that concept, if you really want to be part of a citizen science project or a community science project, then these are good places to start. And many of them use these apps. There are 2 basic apps that I highly recommend. One is iNaturalist and one is eBird. eBird is specific for birds, obviously. If you are a decent birder, eBird is the place you should be entering data in eBird. Even if you think all the birds you're seeing are very common birds, it doesn't matter. Where are you seeing your common birds and when you're seeing them is tremendously useful data. eBird does mean that you know something about what you're seeing. And if you're not there yet, you can use Merlin. And Merlin will help you learn your birds. It will help you identify the birds that you're seeing. And this is an app, again, that's organized by Cornell. I used it years ago. I tried using it as a testing person, and it really wasn't very good, and it's improved tremendously. And the thing about all of these apps is that they learn. The more we contribute and the more we ask the app to identify with us and for us, the more the app learns. You know, whatever. I'm not a, not a writer. I mean, I'm not an IT coder person. I don't know how these apps are set up, but the more people contribute and the more people use them, the better the apps get. And that is absolutely true. So the more we use them, the better they will get. And which is a great thing. But so if you feel like you're not ready for eBird yet and that you need some help, you can start with Merlin. eBird, we'll click on eBird here just for a second, just because it is like the it's like the site for information about birds. Cornell has many different websites, and one of them is called All About Birds. If you want to know anything about any bird in the world, you can go to All About Birds. And all of the data there is from eBird. So like here is where a black kite, which is not a bird we have in our part of the world, but that's what's there in that image. But finding birds, sharing your sightings, keeping track of what you've seen and where you went and when you saw it, that's a totally cool thing that eBird does very nicely. And so it's, it's a very cool thing. And, you can go to your town or your area and you will find a spot and you will see what people have seen there in your area on what, on a given day. You can look up, what does anybody see on February 15th in Concord, whatever, in Sudbury, whatever town you want, it doesn't matter. That information is available on eBird. eBird, they have also digitized data from many, from many years ago. So they have data from like 1900 onwards, I believe. And it's just a tremendous body of information. And then this is one that I tend to use a lot. I'm not a terrific birder, and as I said, I'm not a great recorder. I'm bad at keeping, following my own advice. But iNaturalist is one that I use constantly. And with iNaturalist, it's probably actually going to open to my page, which is not going to give us a truly open page. Maybe, yeah, I think it's already got me signed in. But with iNaturalist, it's very similar. It's similar to eBird, but not the same, in that there are people from all over the world that are contributing data. And this is just a point that both eBird and iNaturalist are just points. What did you see and where was it and when was it? What's nice with using these as phone apps is that if you take an image with your phone, you can upload it to iNaturalist. I usually upload when I get home. I will say that I don't try to upload from the field because it chews up your data and it chews up if you don't have a great connection, if you don't have, like a 4G, whatever it is, whatever the high bandwidth of cellular service is, it can be very slow. So I save the uploads. I don't make the uploads until I get back to Wi-Fi. But the phone has recorded exactly where I was and exactly when I took the picture. So that's great. And what's nice with iNaturalist, which is not true of eBird, is that when you upload it, there will be a thing that says, what did you see? And you can click on that. You don't need to put something in. You click on it and it will give you options. It will say, well, we think because of your image, we think it was this, A, B, C, D, whatever. Seek is somewhat different in that Seek will actually help you identify it more than iNaturalist does. And so again, that it will help you figure out what you saw before you even try to upload it. So these are both excellent generalized naturalist data, whereas eBird is specific for birds. These are, look at this, 57,000 species, or almost 58, no, I'm sorry, 58 million observations and 319,000 species and I think this is low. I feel like there are more. This is 1.5 million observers, but you know, we can go here. We can zoom in here. I think, you know, we can zoom and you can organize it by type of, if you want to look at plants, if you want to look at snails, if you want to look at whatever. And while this is point data, this is not done on any protocol. Once you have loaded an observation, other people you can become an identifier. That is that's fun. You know, when you're sitting around with nothing to do some night, you can go into iNaturalist and identify things. Say, yes, you agree with the identification of that observation. And once a couple people have agreed with the identification, then it becomes a research grade observation. And there are scientists who utilize that data. There are groups in here that are utilizing this data. And even though it's just a point, they can utilize it to look at the whole process. You know, like they're looking at snails in Florida, whatever it is they're looking at. They can take all those individual points, those individual observations of snails in Florida and tell you a tremendous amount about it. One of the very cool events that happens using iNaturalist is it's called the City Nature Challenge. And that happens in April. I think it's usually the last week in April, and the city of Boston and the environs around, we would all be in the city of Boston if we live within, you know, the environs of Boston. We would all contribute to sort of Boston. Is you go out and see what you can find and post into iNaturalist during that weekend, and all that data is I mean, it's a tremendous amount of data. And I know I keep using the word data, but data is great stuff if you're a scientist. The more data, the better. Now see here, finally, sorry, took me forever to get in close enough, but you can see, now we're in close enough to see different colors. And so the different colors denote the different taxa, birds, plants, amphibians, mammals, you know, all those different things will be different colors. We'll go out here to, this is too time consuming. There's too many to get through. See, here we are out at Drumlin Farm already. Let me go in one more time. No, I'm not sure where I am. Oh, there's Trevella Road. So if we click on, we should be able to click on an observation here. And here, oh, now this is not very helpful. This person just put this in as unknown on September 1st of 2020. So that most likely will never become a research grade observation. If they put it in as plant, or even maybe gotten a little bit type of plant, that would have been a much more useful observation. You don't need to know what it is, but you know, like what, you know, where are we? Oh, so they did put a note, fuzzy bud, but by putting it in as unknown, it's very unlikely that an identifier will come along and try to identify this. So even if you put in plant, even if you put in, you know, whatever, put in something, even if you have no idea what it is. And so, you know, and you could put in more for notes, but so that's an observation that just, you know, some individual indicated. I can't, I find these apps to be very useful. And I think this is the state of the world going forward, which is that keeping a field journal is a tremendous thing. And I think there are ways to combine them. Like you can take images with your phone if you can. You can use your field journal to write things in. Or if you have a camera that takes a better image than your phone, which is, you know, most any camera would, but you know, you can take images with your camera and keep your notes in your field journal, because if you're going to upload it to iNaturalist, it's really good to know where it, you have to know where it was taken and when it was taken. Those are two things that are really good to supply, because it truly helps the data point have more rigor. And so there are a lot of other apps out there. There are a lot of identification apps, and I have not used many of them. And I don't know that I would recommend most of them. If you want a good bird identifying app, Merlin helps you work through things. But if you just want like a bird guide as an app, I find Sibley's to be very useful. It's expensive in terms of apps, but it's also, I find it's the most accessible. It's the easiest to use, I think, in many regards. There's iBird Pro, I believe is the name. I lose track of there's several different iBird apps, and I think it's iBird Pro that I know a number of people like that one too. But in terms of other things, I have not found, there's like Leaf Snap, which I used a couple times and didn't like. It may have gotten better because I tried it years ago, but I did not think it was very effective. I tend to use these to take it, you know, to try to identify something I already know and see what it tells me. And I've done that with iNaturalist, and it has definitely gotten better over the years. When iNaturalist was newer, I found that it was often inaccurate in terms of what I already knew. But it has gotten very good. I find that I can put something in and I'll just say, you know, what is it? And the item that I know it is almost always within the first 3 or 4 suggestions. So that's very encouraging to me, that we will have some rigor to this. I know people who believe that iNaturalist is not good because anybody can post anything. But because it needs to be identified and agreed with before it becomes a research grade piece of information, that's really something. I knew this family where there were 3 young kids, and they started using iNaturalist, and the kids they would come back and they would say, "We got another research grade observation." You know, they were so excited when their observations reached research grade that they just, you know, like, we contributed to science. They were so cute about it. But I mean, that's great. If you can do that and get engaged in that. I have a good friend who he tries to put in one new piece of information every day. I'm running out of time. Sorry. I got so caught up in apps. We've got our last slide for the night, big ideas. So the big idea is enjoy your time outside. Pay attention when you're outside. Just start paying attention. Even if you don't do anything else, just start paying attention to what's going on around you when you're out there. Not just what you're walking through. You know, don't just take it in as background data, background information. And then start recording using field journals or field journals and apps or just apps, and see if you can contribute to community science. If you can find a project that you can contribute to and you can do it for the next, 10 months, you can do it for the next 10 years, 50 years. Just imagine what you can contribute for data over the span of your life. It's heartwarming. Okay, so that's the end of the PowerPoint. And if there's any questions or anything that anybody would like to ask or contribute.
I'm not sure if there's any questions.
This will be available to people, correct?
Yeah, so again, everyone, we've recorded this and we will push it out the notification as soon as we have it. So really, I just want to thank you so much, Tia, for sharing your knowledge tonight and spending all of this time with us. I'd like to thank all of you who attended on behalf of Mass Audubon and the Good Now Library Foundation. We appreciate your support and we look forward to hosting more webinars in the future. So please stay warm and stay well and take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Ciao.